everybody, this is Tina with Tina G Photography, and I made a video explaining blending modes and layer masking, so enjoy! If we look right here to the right in our layer palette, we have two layers. We have flowers and we also have an image of a person, subject. Okay, so blending modes are really awesome. What they enable you to do is to allow the top layer to interact with the layer below it. Okay, so what happens is that the layers will look like they're coming in and out of each other and different effects are applied. They're really great when you want to show two layers at the same time, or at least, you know, some parts of the two layers at the same time. So I wanted to bring your attention right here to the top right and the opacity level. What we can do is we can manipulate this lever right here and we can see both of the layers, you know, coming in and out of each other. This is basically affecting the selected layer. And what that's doing, it's creating an opacity and it's modifying the transparency, okay? Now, you know, this might work for some purposes, but it's, you know, it can be better and more interesting to apply blending modes. So our blending modes are right here to the left. I'm going to take my opacity back to 100%, and we're going to look at our blending modes. Now, if you notice, we have different categories of blending modes, okay, and they're divided by this light gray line. So essentially what a blending mode is, it's an algorithm, which is a mathematical equation, and it's telling Photoshop how to make, Photoshop's basically telling how to make the top layer interact with the bottom layer, okay? So let's go ahead and look at the different groups of blending modes. So we have normal, okay, which is basically no blending mode at all, and then dissolve, which affects any sort of transparent pixels. But we don't have that in our top flowers layer, so we don't have to worry about it. Now, if we look at the next group, this is called the darken group, okay? And what that basically does is it takes away any of the light pixels in the top layer and it maintains the dark pixels, okay? So if I select the darken blending mode and I press that, notice how here it's taken away all the light pixels, okay? And it's only maintained the dark pixels. Now, if you notice right here, if you look at this shape right here on the subject's shirt, okay, you can see a shirt peeking through, and this used to be a flower. Let me go back to the normal blending mode, okay? So when it's normal, we can see the white petals of the flower, okay? Now pay attention when I click on darken, okay? What happens is it takes away the light pixels and it only maintains the dark pixels, okay? So if we look at this blending mode group, we'll notice that there's different options. There's multiply, color burn, linear burn, and darker color. And these all basically work on the same principle that distinguishes all darken blending modes, and that's taking away the light pixels. But it's different levels of it, and, you know, basically different, you know, intensities of the darkening blending mode. Okay. So let's move on to the next blending mode group, and that's the lighten group. And that basically works the opposite of the darken group, whereas instead of taking away all the light pixels, it takes away the dark pixels. So if we can pay attention to this flower that we had modified when we used a darken blending mode, if I press lighten, look at the flower now, okay? Now it's keeping its, you know, original we can see the flower again, and we can also see all the other light flowers in the image. But if you notice, a lot of the darker pixels have, you know, disappeared. So again, you know, toggling through the different lighten modes will, you know, give us different levels of that command. Okay. So that's the lighten group. The next group, which starts with overlay, is our contrast group. Now, to apply contrast to an image is to lighten our lights and darken our darks, okay? So we have overlay here, and that's basically adding more contrast. When we lighten our lights and darken our darks, we're creating more contrast in our image. And then all these other images are different, all these other blending modes are just different levels of applying that contrast blending mode, okay? So I'm going to go back to overlay. Now I wanted to bring your attention to these two groups, okay? The one that starts with difference is called the inverse and cancellation group. And this has more of a positive negative relationship on your image, creating a positive or negative, effect on your image. That's called the inverse and cancellation group. The next group is called the component group. And here we have hue, we have saturation, okay, we have color, luminosity. And what these do is they preserve, some component of the top layer. So in this instance, it would be hue. This would be saturation. More than likely, you'll probably be using these three blending modes the most. The darken blending modes, the lighten blending modes, and the contrast blending modes, especially at, this point of your photo editing career. Okay, so what I'm going to go ahead and do is switch back to overlay. Okay, and here we've lightened our lights and darkened our darks, and this is different from just, I'll go back to normal. This is different from just lowering the opacity and letting the two images come through. Okay, by actually choosing a blending mode, we're applying more of a Photoshop technique to it. And then you can also adjust the transparency of that blending mode as well if you'd like to. Okay, so that's our blending modes. Now, what I'd like to do with this image, I really like how the flowers are coming through on the subject's shirt. I like how they're looking on the background, okay? But what I want to do is I want to cover up the flowers on his face, okay? Now, there's a few ways that we can do that. We can hit our eraser tool, okay, and we can just go ahead and start erasing, okay, that part of the layer. Now, this way of working is called destructive, okay? What's happening is I'm destroying these pixels, okay? You never ever want to use the eraser tool. Maybe there might be a couple situations where you might want to, you're making a selection, you might want to get rid of a few stray pixels, on the edge of your selection. Maybe that's an okay time to use an eraser. But really, you should stay away from using the eraser, because what we want to do is we want to do more of what's called non-destructive editing, and that's preserving our pixels in case we want to go back to them and go back to that image and use it at a later time. If you look here at this layer palette, I've basically erased all these pixels on this flowers image. I'm never going to be able to get them back, okay? If I close the image, I won't be able to get them back. So I'm going to go ahead and Command Z and go back to where I started. And a better way of working, better way of editing is creating what's called a layer mask, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my color palette and make sure that white is on top, okay? If white isn't on top, then what you can do, like if black was on top, for example, you could just press this little arrow and it'll make white on top, okay? So making sure white's on top, I'm going to go ahead and go down to the bottom of my layer palette, okay, and go to what looks like a circle inside of a square, and that's my Add Layer Mask button. Now again, with Photoshop, if there's so many tools and commands in this program, if you forget what's what, just go ahead and float your mouse over one of the functions and it'll tell you exactly what that is. So I'm going to go ahead and add a layer mask. And notice that it's filled with white, okay? Just like it was beforehand. It's now filled with black, but we'll get back to that, okay? Also, if you'll notice, around the layer mask is a white bounding box, okay? This means my layer mask is selected, okay? If my bounding box was around my image, okay, and I started painting, that's not what we want to do, okay? We want to make sure, I'm going to go ahead and Command Z out of that. We want to make sure that our bounding box is around our actual layer mask, okay? So we can apply our modifications to that. Now, basically what a layer mask is it's masking out, okay, how this layer will show on this layer, okay? So right now we can see all of this layer, even though we have a blending mode on and it's, affecting how the two layers are interacting. This layer is, over the subject's face. We can see all of the layer. What I want to do is I want to create a mask on this layer, okay, that will be hiding the subject's face. So you won't be able to see that. So in other words, we want to create a mask, okay? So what I'll do is I'll go to my layer palette, making sure that black is in front, okay? Because our layer mask is white, so we want the opposite color, all right? Then I'll go ahead and select a brush tool up here, okay? And then making sure that my mask is activated, I'll zoom in by pressing the Command plus sign, okay? Using my space bar to move through the document, right? And I'll go ahead and just start painting, okay? And if you'll see now that I'm basically covering up that layer, how it's showing up on the layer below it. And if you look at my layer palette, there's a black area that's created where I'm making my mask. This is showing what my mask is. So I'm going to go ahead and just keep on doing that. Okay. Now what I want to do is I want to make my brush bigger. Okay. If I go to the top of the toolbar, okay, I'll notice right here if I drop down this menu, okay, I can adjust the size of my brush, all right, making it really big, or I can make it really small, okay. I can also adjust the hardness of my brush, okay, making it really hard or making it really soft, okay. Let's talk about size real quick. Again, I can manipulate it this way, okay, but when you're editing, you want to preserve time, or conserve time, I should say, as much as you can, because you want to get your workflow down, you want to be moving fast, you don't want to have to keep going up here and changing the size of your brush. There's a much more efficient way to work, and that's using keyboard shortcuts. So the way you can modify your brush size by using keyboard shortcuts is by your left and your right bracket key, and those are to the right of your P key on your keyboard. So if you watch my brush right here, if I press the right bracket key, that will make my brush bigger, okay? If I press my left bracket key, that will make my brush smaller, okay? Now if I'm, working in large areas, using a large brush would be a good idea, because then I can, I can cover large areas, in a short amount of time. Now when it comes to the detail areas like these edges, I'm going to want to use a smaller brush, okay? And I'm going to want to zoom in, okay? To really get those details and, make sure that I'm, making really good selections and not going over the edge, okay? So again, right bracket key makes your brush big, and your left bracket key makes your brush small, okay? Now, there's also sometimes when you want to modify the hardness of your brush, okay? So if you have your brush that has a really hard edge, okay, I'll make my brush bigger so you can see it. It's going to look like this, okay? And there might be some times when you want that hard of an edge, but when it comes to making selections like this, okay, I like to use a brush that's maybe not all the way soft, but maybe like 2/3 of the way, or 80% of the way or something. So this is what a soft brush is going to look like. Notice the difference between the hard edge and the soft edge. The soft edge will have a nicer transition. Again, it depends on exactly, what type of effect you're doing or what type of manipulation you're trying to do, okay? So like with modifying the size of your brush, you can go up here and you can change the size, but going back and forth like this just takes too much time. And again, we really want to conserve our time because, we want to get our photo editing done, as efficiently as possible. So there's a keyboard shortcut for modifying the hardness and softness of your brush, okay? And that's the bracket key as well, but that is using the Shift key as well as a bracket key. Okay, so if I hold down the Shift key and press the left bracket, that will make my brush small, okay? If I press the Shift key and press the right bracket, that will make my brush hard, okay? So Shift, left key will make it small, and it goes down in size a little bit smaller, but it's really soft, all right? And then Shift and right bracket key will make it hard, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and Command Z out of all of those options. So just so you remember, right bracket key makes our brush bigger, left bracket key makes our brush smaller, shift and right bracket key makes our brush hard, shift and left bracket key makes our brush softer. And you can see these changes happen while you're making, you know, those keyboard shortcuts up here. Okay. So I'm going to get back to making my mask on my subject's face. And I'm getting to the edge. So what I want to do is I want to make my brush smaller, okay, by pressing that left bracket key. And then also making it as soft as can. It's pretty soft right now. I'm just going to go up a stage. I'm just going to go to the edge right here. Okay. Just his ears covered with yellow. I'm going to go ahead and mask that out. Okay. Now, if you look here, I've gone over the edge right here. Okay. Now, this is why using a layer mask is so much better than using an eraser tool. Because if you used an eraser tool, yeah, you could Command Z back, but you know, once you've surpassed, you know, all your history states, which could, you know, be 10 or 20 or 30 states, depending on what your presets are, you can't go back. So it's always good to use a layer mask. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and change the color in my paintbrush to white, okay? And I can do that by either using these arrow keys, or again, as I said, the best way to work is by using a keyboard shortcut, which is X. So I'll hit X, and my paintbrush becomes white, and then look what happens when I paint back in. I can paint back in that layer, okay? So I've corrected my mistake, all right? So now I'm going back to, you know, the face. So I want to go and reload my brush back with black ink, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and press the X key, and I'll go ahead and go back to painting. Okay, now we want to remember that black conceals and white reveals when it comes to mask color. And what that means is white will reveal, okay, all of this layer on top of that layer, okay? So white reveals. Black, however, will conceal this layer showing up on that layer. So black conceals. White reveals, black conceals. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and keep on painting. I'm not going to be super accurate here. Oops, I made a mistake, so I'll go ahead and press X. Okay, go ahead and paint that back. Press X again to get back to black. Press the space bar to move through my document. That's how I made that mistake before. I thought I pressed the space bar and I pressed something else. So I'm not going to be making a super accurate mask right here just because of time's sake. Just showing you, you know, the basic techniques so you can get this idea. All right. So again, look how I'm building up this mask in the layer palette. Okay. I'll go ahead and draw that in more using my space bar to move through the document. Go ahead and paint that in. All right. Paint his ear in. Okay. Okay. Oops, I've gone too far. I'll press the X key. Paint that back in. Okay, paint this edge back in too. Press the X key again to get back to my black paintbrush so I can go ahead and keep painting in that mask. Okay, still got a lot to do, so I'm just going to go through this really quickly. Make my paintbrush large because the hair is a big area and I just want to be efficient with my time. Now keep in mind, even though you want to be efficient with your time, I'm able to be efficient with my time because I've been doing this for a while. Okay, so when you're learning Photoshop, what's more important is you're doing things correctly instead of just rushing through them. So I just wanted to throw that out there. All right, so if I look here at my layer mask, I can tell that I've missed a few spots because I see that little white spot right there. So I'm going to go ahead and try to find it, and I think it's probably right here. I don't know. There we go, I got it because I see it disappearing. This white spot right here, see it disappearing. There we go. So again, this is not perfect, but you get the general technique. So I'm going to go ahead and press Command minus to zoom out so I can see what I'm doing. And if you see right here, zoom out again, okay, we have the blending mode applied, okay, to the subject shirt, but we've made a layer mask, okay, to conceal that layer affecting the layer underneath. Black conceals and then white reveals, okay? Now, if you want to go ahead and, gauge your progress while you're, layer masking, what you can do is you can hold your mouse over the layer mask, press the shift key, and a red X will appear. And that will temporarily disable your layer mask. Okay? You can go ahead and do that again to bring back your layer mask. All right. So if you've created a mask and you decide, I don't really like it, I think I want to start over, no problem. What you can do is make sure that your layer mask is activated by having a white bounding box around it. And then float your mouse over the trash can here in the bottom right hand corner of your layer palette. Press it. This dialog box will come up. Apply mask layer before removing. No, you just want to get rid of it. Delete, and voila, it's gone. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and press Command Z. Now, if you had your actual layer activated with the white bounding box on it, around it, if you were to press the trash can, it would just get rid of that layer. So you don't want to do that. Okay. So that is an introduction to blending modes and also one way that you can create a mask in your layer palette. So have fun creating your images.